Hey, what's up everybody? East Philly here, back in the garage. Today I'm going to be trying to get some stuff done so I can get the intercooler out of my 2007 WRX in preparation for putting a new downpipe. I got an Invidia downpipe, 1-cat, 3-inch internal diameter to replace the 2-cat, 2.5-inch internal diameter downpipe that comes stock on the WRX. Hopefully this adds a little bit of horsepower, kind of keeps everything cooler a little bit. Not too much sound extra, but enough that it kind of gives a nice little grumble. And just kind of makes the car a little bit more peppy. If it helps with the rev hang and all that type of stuff, that'll be great. But that might have to just wait for a regular tune. This is going to be done over multiple days, probably weeks maybe. Not the whole process, but the video. Because right now I'm just trying to get the intercooler off. I tried last night, I couldn't do it too well. So I'm going to try to do that again today. See if I can get it off and start spraying some of the bolts that need to come out with some PB blaster so that when I actually do the actual install, nothing breaks and it makes it a little bit easier. So here we see the intercooler. It's not too hard to get it, like all the bolts off for it. It's just kind of hard to get the actual intercooler off, at least on my car. I'm going to try to set the camera up so you can see what I'm doing with both my hands, because I can't do it while holding the camera and the light. So here's what we need to do in order to remove the intercooler. You can either take out that bolt and that bolt that I had lost already, or you can just unplug the hoses, those two hoses and that one right there. You're going to unbolt these two bolts for the bypass valve, loosen up those two locking collars there so that the intercooler can pop off, and then down there you're going to have to loosen up the locking collar there. That's the tube going to the turbocharger. And then after that, none of that is too hard to do, everything comes off really easily. We need to actually pull the intercooler off by going that way, angling it up, and then that way to get it off of that turbo hose. So with everything loosened up, you can see everything's out. I'm going to start trying to remove the intercooler. Again, you have to push it toward the car, angle it up a bit to release off of the intake, right about there, and then go that way so it comes off of the turbo over here. And I have not had any luck with this doing it before. It's easy to get to here, but once I get it out here, I'm having a bit of trouble getting it off of the turbo. And of course today it wants to be super easy to do, and I do it in one shot. Now with the intercooler off, we see the turbo right here. That's the turbo heat shield. And I'm going to start spraying around that to loosen up the bolts on the heat shield so that when I actually do take them off, it's not going to be too hard. I might try to take them off today and grease them up so it's easier when I do the full install later on. So I did a little bit of work, and now you can see the turbocharger here and the bolts that I'm going to need to take off the downpipe, which is right there. There's two here, one there. I think there's one on the other side and two on the bottom. I'm not going to do this today, taking any of it off, because I'm waiting for the gasket to come in. I just wanted to get to here and start spraying the bolts down so that when it is time to remove everything, it shouldn't be too hard to do. There's only 2 or 3 bolts that I'm going to have to do with this. The other are just studs that bolt on, and then should be good to go. It wasn't too hard to get into here, but there's a lot of hard to reach bolts, especially when you're only doing it from the top. So little hitch was that happened with the screw or bolt and nut, and I had to pretty much cut it apart into shrapnel. So we're actually going to do the whole job today. Again, I have to take off the hoses from whatever pipe that is, have to take off the bypass valve, the intercooler bolts on both sides. We'll go in, we'll take off the turbo heat shield, and that will get us to the studs and the nuts and bolts that hold the downpipe down there into the turbo. I've been doing all this over the past few weeks just to grease the bolts and get everything ready for today to make it easier. Once we get under the car, we're going to have to take off the mounting bolt that mounts the downpipe to the frame of the car, the O2 sensor disconnected from the catback exhaust. So the only big part we have to figure out today is the bottom part, which shouldn't be too hard. Okay, now we're at the turbo heat shield. I've taken this off a few times. I actually had to take this piece off, but I can kind of get to those first. So either one comes off. This needs to come off just to get this off easier. And this just is a mounting point for the intercooler. But I've hand tightened most of these screws on. Here, on the side, on here, and on the side, just to keep it in place for now. There's 8 screws in total that you're going to have to take off. One is down the back, 2 over here, 1 on the back side, 2 on this side, and I believe 2 over here if that equals 8. There might not be a second over here if that didn't equal 8. Okay, this is with the heat shield off. This is the bolt that I had problem with here. I'm not going to touch it because I just burned myself. So that one, the nut came halfway off and then stopped and it was stripped. And it took me a while to get it off because I tried to get it off wrong the first time. You can kind of see all the little marks on the turbo. That's where my Dremel hit it. Nothing too bad. So you got 2 up top. You got 1 here on this side. Right there, that's a stud. And then there's 1 below it, which is also a stud. It's a little hard to see from up top. You can kind of see the end of it right there. It's actually easier to get from up here than to go under the car and get it. I tried going under the car and get it. There's not a lot of room. And then there's 1 over here that's also a stud. It's kind of back behind some stuff. It's, again, easier to get from up top. Once you get the top 2 off, this little turbo mount here will come off as well. That holds on the heat shield. And then we'll go under the car for the rest of the downpipe. Okay, under the car now, I have all the studs and everything cleared out. We're going to need to use a screwdriver to take off the O2 sensor here. That wraps around. Try to remember the routing of it because that'll make it easier later on. We need to take off this bolt here, which I believe, and then the exhaust are 12mm though, so I'll leave that down here. That doesn't help. My assistant is dropping everything.
Where's your 14?
It's probably still up on the window. So we'll see. I think it's a 14. Yeah, it fits. So that's a 14, and then the exhaust is a 12. I'll probably need a shorter 14 though, because the deep socket hits the frame. So I'm going to undo all that, and we'll see what else we need to do to get the downpipe off. Okay, we got the downpipe off. You can see it here with the 2 cats on it. And we're going to be going over to this Invidia downpipe that only has the 1 cat on it. No heat shields. This is 6 pounds lighter than this, which is a good amount. Don't know how much this weighs without the heat shields. That might take off a couple pounds, but I don't know if people would feel comfortable running it without heat shields in general. The biggest problem we had, so this is the exhaust side, is this hanger here. It was just getting the hanger off. I had to get some rope in there to pull the hanger down to get this out. You can see there's a little hole there for the bolt. This side you can see that the parts of the bolt and the nuts are still on it. I was able to get that nut off. It didn't make a difference. This one, as I was undoing the bolt, it snapped in half and that came out. This side I actually had to take a Sawzall and cut the bolt to get this off. Can't reuse the donut gasket on this one because it's terrible. So it's a good thing that I bought a new one. And then this is the adapter. So this is the exhaust side here. It's a 2.5 inch. You can see I cut myself. 2.5 inch, and that goes on the donut gasket. And on this side is a 3 inch with that gasket. And the reason I bought this adapter is because this is a larger internal diameter, and that'll go onto that side and I'll reduce it down, and that will help prevent any exhaust leaks from happening there. So the next thing I have to do is get the O2 sensor off of here. You could use a socket wrench if you want and just slide it over this and go down. I decided to buy this O2 sensor. It's made for oxygen sensor sockets. That goes right on top of that. Helps you get everything off easier. I believe this one needs a 1/2 inch drive, which I have. I'm going to get that off, and then I'll put some anti-seize on the threads of it and I'll screw it into the other one. Not too much work, just kind of tight spaces to get into, so that's just something you're going to have to consider. And getting it out from under there, I have it pretty high up on jack stands and off the ground. It's going to be pretty hard to do if you're a little lower than this, mainly for room, but I'm using the little sled here, so that kind of takes me off of the ground a little bit. If you're doing it on concrete like this, I would suggest putting some cardboard down just so you're able to slide your body around a little bit easier on the cardboard. Okay, here we are up top. You can see everything is disconnected, and then we have the old gasket here. You might just have to pry that off a little bit because it's got a lot of heat on it. And then there's studs down there. You have to get it off the studs. There we go. Got the old gasket off. Old gasket doesn't look too bad, but we are going to replace it with a new OEM gasket. And I can't open with one hand, but this is going to go on. There's a part number if you need it. Gasket turbo outlet. So when you're doing this part, we tried to put the downpipe on, but we're keep hitting that thing, whatever it is. See if I can zoom in a little bit. That thing. Not exactly sure what it is. It looks like something broke off of it. And then there's this heat shield under it, and it sits kind of like that under it. But we might have to cut off some of this spot here in order for the new downpipe to fit. I looked at Cobb's, how their downpipe fits, and they do say you need to modify the heat shield a bit. But I didn't really say anything about the bottom piece, only the top. But I'm probably just going to modify it because I don't really need that space for the new downpipe. The new downpipe doesn't have a hole for that to be used, so that doesn't matter too much. Okay, there's a few things under here to go over. So the downpipe is connected to the turbo. There was a bracket right about here, connected to here. I took that off because it looked like it snapped and broke off as something else. I don't know what was on there, but it was like close to the downpipe before. And then under here I have zip ties on this hanger that I can't really give you a good. So this is part of the downpipe, and there's a hanger there. Downpipe went up and into the hanger and then a screw through it, but I can't do that on this one for some reason. It seemed like the tolerances are just real tight, so I zip tied it. Not a huge deal, it's not going to rattle. The oxygen sensor is plugged back in. and that kind of goes up and over into here somewhere. See if I can see where it goes. It might be over here. You can see that's the wire. No, there it is. That's the O2 clip. I wasn't able to use the factory points where it clipped onto. It seems like the O2 sensor is down further down here. And it was kind of stretching it, so I didn't want to pull it too much. And then we got the gasket in with the adapter. There's the regular gasket on this side, and you can see the donut gasket under there. That should have squished in better, but it's not. I think some of the donut material from the old donut got kind of stuck in there, and it won't let me squish that in. I scraped out as much as I could, but I couldn't get all of it, even with heating it up and doing a lot of scraping. So once that heats up, I'm going to double check it in a couple days. I'll drive it around. Once it heats up, I'll come under and I'll tighten these again to see if maybe that'll squish a bit better. Even if it's not sealing right, it's just some exhaust comes out. That'll be a little smelly inside, but it's not going to do anything bad to the car. So that's kind of just where I'm at right now. I'm cutting up the zip ties, and then I'm going to go in and reinstall the heat shields. Okay, up here, you got to make sure you put this bracket on before you put these two bolts on. I kind of forgot to do that, but this bracket is what's going to hold the heat shield on. So now we're going to put the heat shield on, and it doesn't look like it's probably going to fit exactly correct, because this part of the new downpipe is a little bit wider than the old one. We found that out because before we could see the other stud down there, now we can't. So we're gonna test fit the heat shield, and if I have to make any cuts to that, I'll show you where I'm cutting and what I'm doing. We did have to cut up the other heat shield that goes on the bottom to fit this one. Nothing too big or important. That'll be one of the screws for the heat shield, but we might wind up cutting that same screw hole off. So once we get the heat shield mocked up for cutting, if we have to cut it, I'll videotape that as well. So after trying to test it, it looks like we're going to have to cut most of this part off. That bolt was on the heat shield on the bottom that we cut off. These bolts were actually on the downpipe, the factory downpipe, on a little ding that was welded on there, a little bung, whatever it's called, bung. And this part's actually rubbing the new downpipe where this curve is. So I'm going to cut off pretty much all of that and mount it up. Okay, so you can see I cut straight down this end and then over and cut a little bit too much. That should help it fit on without touching the new downpipe. You still see we have a couple mounting points left. Should be all we really need. Okay, the heat shield's on. It leaves 4 bolts. You see the 2 over here. I have 1 here on the front. If I can focus. It's like right where the shadow is, pretty much. You can kind of see it. We had to bend up a lot of in there to make it fit correctly. Now you can see that nut. We had to bend a lot of that to fit correctly, and I kind of wanted to keep as much on instead of cutting it. So we just bent it, and then one of the screws goes down there. I couldn't get it to line up correctly, so it won't go in, but there is a screw hole still, so you should be pretty good to get it in there if you can reach it. Next up, we're going to be putting on the bracket here that holds on the intercooler, and then we'll start getting everything up top figured out and put together. Okay, the heat shield is on. Like I said before, these are all 10mm sockets. I don't like using the Phillips head when I do that because it just tends to strip. Then you put on this mount that goes down there. Those are 12mm sockets. It's just 2 bolts. That lets you bolt the intercooler on. So the intercooler goes on, the 2 bolts, the bypass valve, I just have to tighten that up. And then it goes down onto the turbo here. The biggest problem I have with these ones is that this plastic, this is more plastic than rubber. It's kind of like a harder rubber, I guess. It's not like this where it's kind of flimsy on the ends. You have to heat it up a bit if it's not sliding on right, and you want to make sure it gets on all the way up to that little notch there. And then you don't want to forget to tighten these down. I forgot to do that once, but not a big deal. And then you tighten these two clamps down. On here, you can see I broke a screw off in there. I still have the one hole. I just lost that screw though. So that rail will go on. You might have to heat up these ends here to get them onto the rail. And once I get that on, I'll stop back in so we can kind of just do a full overview of the whole top. Okay, we did everything we need to do with the hood open, heat shields back on, intercoolers back on, intercooler mounts on, all the piping is on, the whatever that is on, bypass valve, these are all tightened up. I didn't disconnect anything, and that's pretty much it in terms of getting to the turbo and the downpipe. So we're going to close the hood, I'm going to get the car lowered, and then I'm going to go in and flash the tune.